Hi everyone, this is Brandy Owens and I will be presenting my project for Task 4, our Technology Integration Project on Scratch Junior and Creative Writing. I integrated Scratch Junior into our second grade creative writing lessons, and before we begin I want to give you an introduction of the Scratch Junior program. This is a video that was created by MIT about the program.
We're working on Scratch Junior, which is a programming language for young kids, specifically designed for 5 to 7-year-olds, and is designed with them in mind, so it's developmentally appropriate, and children can create animated stories, interactive games, collages, or anything they imagine.
I like Scratch Junior because there's so many programs that you can make. It's like you can make your own movie. You basically get to make your own game and do it yourself.
Okay, so that was a short video created about the program. It kind of gives you a background of what it is and why it was created. And so now I want to show you the interface. This is what it looks like. Our students used it as an iPad, as an app on the iPad, and this is the screen that they saw. And so, it is a coding or a programming type interface where they pull the blocks down and they animate their characters within the program. They can choose their own background. And so I'm going to show you the website. This is the Scratch Junior website, and it's a great place to go if you're a first-time user of Scratch and you want to learn a little bit more about it so that you can teach your students, or if you want to show your students this website. It gives you an interface guide, a paint editor guide so that you can change your characters around, the block descriptions, what each block does and how you can use it to make your characters move. You can download the guide as a PDF, or you can watch the videos. They have a video on creating projects, creating character animation, using multiple characters, and then using the trigger blocks. So this is a great website to use to learn more about the program. So my idea began when I was working with our second grade writing small groups, and I noticed that my students were having difficulties putting their thoughts on paper. And so they also had a hard time expressing their stories verbally to me, and we were mostly working with narrative writing. And so I wondered, how could I get them to creatively express themselves so that it makes it easier, or so that it flows better and they can put their thoughts on paper. And so I started thinking about how I was using coding in the classroom and some of the different programs that we had learned about Scratch and Scratch Junior, and I knew that our engineering teacher was using Scratch in his class, so the students would be familiar with it. But after I saw the video by MIT, I learned that this was a program where the students could actually tell a story and create their own animations. And so I thought this would be a great way for my second grade students to use a different media to express themselves creatively, and I thought this might help them to spark a story and so that they can put their thoughts on paper. And so when I started writing my lesson, I began to think about how to integrate technology and how this would apply to the 4 C's. And after I wrote my lesson, I saw that the students, they're actually going above and beyond by using the iPads. The iPad is not just a tool for them to use to play with, but it's another means of expression. It's a way for them to have some more creative expression and hopefully make it easier for them to kind of put their ideas into words when they start writing. In the lesson, they're also given a chance to collaborate with their peers so that they can help each other use the program. They're able to communicate with their teachers and their peers to share their stories and animations. And the students are using critical thinking skills to put together codes to animate their stories within the Scratch program. So I began this activity with 5 second grade students, and we worked on it for 2 weeks. I pulled the students into the media center in the afternoons and worked with them in small group and one-on-one. I first asked the students to write a narrative based on a topic that I gave them, and they were just asked to write. They could use any writing method that they wanted. They could do a brainstorm or an outline. They were just asked to write, and the topic was If I Were a Superhero. After they had the chance to go through the writing process with the first topic, I gave them a second topic, and they were asked to create an animation within Scratch about this topic, and it was My Undersea Adventure. And so they had several days to work on their animation, and after they were finished with their animation, they were asked to write about it, to now write about My Undersea Adventure as a topic. And so, this is an example of one of my students' stories for If I Were a Superhero. And she starts out with she has a great beginning. She's going to save people from tornadoes, and she's going to have ice powers so that if anybody's doing anything wrong, she can freeze them and she can make it snow. And she talks about how she would love to save people and be a superhero. But then she kind of gets a little off track and starts talking about her grandmother, and she doesn't really she tells me what she would do if she were a superhero, but there's a lack of storyline to it. And so that was her first narrative, and then I gave her the topic of My Undersea Adventure, and this was her Scratch program that she came up with.
Again, the story time. Hello, I'm going to be under the sea all day. Play it again. Whoa, that's a big whale. There's a fish.
Okay, so that was her animation that she created in Scratch Junior for My Undersea Adventure. After she finished her creation, I kind of met with each student and we conferenced about their story, and I probed them with questions and asked what's going to happen in your story, what can happen at the end, what's going to happen next, and they gave me some really good answers. I talked about finding buried treasure and meeting up with some pirates and things like that. They had some really great answers. So then I asked them to write their narrative. I apologize. So then I asked them to write their narrative, and she did a great job of describing what happens in her animation, but there was, again, it lacked a storyline. My hope was that she would be able to use her animation to spark a story about some events and things that happened, but instead I found that the student simply described what was happening in her animation. And so that brings me to the results that I found. My expectations were that the students would be able to use the animated stories as a new way to express themselves creatively, and in turn this would help them with putting their words on paper. But what I found is that although the students could tell a wonderful verbal story about their animations in Scratch Junior, they still had difficulties putting those stories on paper. Instead of writing the creative story they told me, they simply described what was happening in their animation. And so some lessons that I learned and some modifications that I would make for this activity, for the writing part, I would definitely model a little bit more, model for the students what a narrative looks like, model for them, that it has a storyline, that there's a beginning, middle, and end, that there are events that happen in the middle, that there's detail. And this may have been just kind of a lack of, because I'm not their classroom teacher, me being the media specialist versus their classroom teacher, and what have they done with writing so far. And I also wondered if they were developmentally ready in second grade to kind of think, that far with a narrative, and wondered if maybe this would work with an older grade level, such as 3rd or 4th grade with the original, the Scratch original version. For technology, I would definitely allow the students to work more with the program before we begin the activity. I knew that they were familiar with it, but I think they needed maybe another day to just kind of play around with it and get used to it before they actually had an assignment. And so those were some things that I learned and some modifications that I would make if I were to do it again. So thank you for listening to my presentation. You can check out the lesson plan on my Google site, and I look forward to any feedback you can give me. Thanks.